Hey guys, welcome back and thanks for joining me. I'm your host, Sherry. Today's story is one I first heard about back in 2008, and I remember feeling horrified. I do want to warn you guys, this one is graphic and disturbing, and just to elaborate on that, I'll be describing a death with details that some may not be able to handle well, mainly because there is one subject I'll be touching on, which is something I haven't before, and that's cannibalism. My sources are listed in the description area. This is the case of Tim McLean and Vince Lee. This story takes place in Canada back in 2008. Some highlights from 2008 include the economic recession. I remember trying to buy a car in 2008, and it was like pulling teeth because banks weren't loaning money to anyone. Barack Obama won the election against John McCain. Google released the Chrome browser, which is my favorite still to this day. The highest grossing film in 2008 was The Dark Knight. The average income was $40,000 per year. Michael Phelps won his 8th gold medal, breaking Mark Spitz's record. And lastly, Lady Gaga released her debut album, The Fame, which is her best album, in my opinion. The story is about two men who are complete strangers to one another, Tim McLean and Vince Lee. Just some background info on the two of them. Tim McLean is a 22-year-old man who was born October 3rd, 1985. He grew up in a small town outside of Winnipeg in Canada. Tim's parents are Tim Sr. and Carol. Tim was a cool guy, according to his family and friends. He was friendly, a free spirit, and just a good dude. Tim is a carnival worker and enjoyed the band Insane Clown Posse. At the carnival, Tim ran booths and games, and he loved it so much that he even had "Wanna Play" tattooed in cursive script across his stomach. He also had Joker's Wild tattooed on himself, as well as Marvin the Martian from Looney Tunes. Tim didn't really have a fixed address. He would stay with his parents for a few weeks and then go stay with friends for a while. He just kind of bounced around and took various jobs during the off season. One thing that everyone agrees on is that Tim was a people person. He could go anywhere and make friends. He was extroverted and loved conversing with everyone, even strangers he just met. Now, Tim had a woman who was kind of in his life, and her name is Colleen. They had known each other since first grade, and she had recently divorced from her husband, and her and Tim rekindled the relationship temporarily. Now, Colleen has 2 kids, and she ends up getting pregnant by Tim. Tim isn't too excited about it, though. He feels he's not ready to have kids, and he's only 22. And according to an article on winnipegsun.com, he actually asked her to have an abortion, and she made an appointment, but she never went. So at the time this story takes place, Colleen is 4 months pregnant with Tim's child. Again, they were only together briefly, and they are not together anymore. The next person in this story is a man named Vince Lee. Vince is a Chinese-Canadian man who is 40 years old. In 1992, Vince graduated from Wuhan Institute of Technology with a degree in computers. He had worked in China as a computer software engineer in the 90s, and in 2001, he would travel to Canada to live there. In 2005, Vince was diagnosed with schizophrenia. He didn't take any medications for it, though. For years, he just went untreated. It was like he was a ticking time bomb. Vince became a Canadian citizen in 2006, which is only 2 years before this story takes place. Vince married a woman named Anna who worked as a waitress, and Vince worked at a church for a little bit. The pastor said he did his job well, and he seemed like a great worker despite having a language barrier. He showed no signs of being an asshole or being aggressive. Vince eventually would take a job as a forklift operator. And Vince is getting frustrated because he has this college degree, but he wasn't able to find any jobs that he could use his degree. He was working basic jobs that paid less than what he believed he was worth. One day he left his wife a note that said, "I'm gone. Don't try to find me." He left and he didn't come back. In 2008, Vince took a job at Walmart, and not long before this story takes place, he was fired after having some sort of a disagreement or altercation or something with another worker there. So we've got Tim and we've got Vince, and we're going to discuss how these two random lives have anything to do with one another. On July 30th, 2008, Tim finished up his gig at the carnival. He had been touring with the carnival for weeks and is excited to go home. He hops on a Greyhound bus number 1170, which is going to take him from Edmonton to Winnipeg. A friend told him, "Why don't you just take a plane? It'll be so much faster," because this is going to be like a really long ride, like over 18 hours, and that includes all the stops the bus is going to make and so on. It was less costly to take the bus, but friends had offered to put their money together to buy him a plane ticket, but he said he just wanted to take the bus. Tim sits in the back row right in front of the bathroom. He's got his phone and he begins texting. He texts his ex-girlfriend, Alexandra. He and Alexandra stayed friends after their breakup. He tells her some of the other passengers were taking ecstasy. They texted back and forth a lot during this trip, and he tells her when he touches down, he has to stop at his friend's house and collect his iguana, who has been being taken care of by this friend while he was traveling with the carnival. He was also looking forward to seeing his parents. He sends her a message and says he's going to charge his phone when he gets to the next stop since his phone was dying. Tim puts his headphones in, and he closes his eyes and rests his head on the window, hoping to catch some sleep. The movie, The Return of Zorro, played on the bus's television screen. Meanwhile, one of the passengers, Vince Lee, had gotten on the bus. Before this, Vince was sitting on a bench at the bus stop for like the whole night before and the next day. One person in the area said they passed him around 3 o'clock a.m. and he is sitting upright with his eyes wide open. He has his laptop with a sign that read, "For sale, $600. People who had interacted with Vince that day say he was just kind of sitting on the bench and that he gave bad vibes and just seemed like an off kind of guy, and he seemed pretty agitated. A teenager on his bike pulls up and jokingly offers him $50 for the laptop, and Vince says, "How about 60?" The teen buys the laptop from him for $60. Vince tells him for another $35 he can have the laptop bag to go with it, but the boy says he doesn't have any more money. So Vince gives him the laptop bag for free. He rides away, but then returns shortly and says he needs the passcode to get the laptop to work. Vince gives him the numerical passcode. The boy said he rode away and then saw a Greyhound bus pull up and the man was gone from the bench. Vince boards the bus and it takes off. One woman who boarded the bus next to Vince said he was muttering something to himself in a foreign language as they were getting on, and he seemed agitated. Vince is sitting in the front. Eventually, he makes his way to the back and sits next to Tim, who is resting his eyes and listening to his headphones. Tim acknowledged Vince as he sat next to him and said, "Hello," and then he goes back to resting. It was quiet, just the humming of the bus driving down the highway and the sound of Antonio Banderas speaking as Zorro on the television screen. Suddenly, the other 38 passengers said they heard the loudest scream they've ever heard. Vince has a large Bowie knife. He is stabbing Tim in the neck and the chest. The passengers on this bus all described the scream they heard coming from Tim was the most blood-curdling scream they've ever heard. Many say it still haunts them today. The bus driver pulls over on the side of the highway and passengers exit the bus quickly. The bus driver yells for him to stop. Once the bus driver realized there wasn't anything he could really do anymore, he exits the bus. 3 men attempted to get back in the bus to rescue Tim, who is obviously deceased at this point, but they're worried about being killed themselves. They really don't know if Tim is deceased because they know he was stabbed, but everything happened so quickly, they don't know the extent of his injuries. Vince slashed at the door with his large knife to show anyone who came through the door that they would be killed as well. Another bus was in the area and stopped because they saw this bus pulled over and passengers standing outside and looking distraught. This driver's name was Bernie, and he had been a bus driver for 35 years. He actually made his way onto the bus in the middle of this vicious attack. Talk about being brave. Bernie is trying to get him to stop, but he's doing it from a distance. He saw a crazed look in Vince's eye, and Vince yells to him 2 words, "Get emergency." Bernie can tell Tim is deceased because he had been stabbed over 50 times, and now he's focused on his neck. He said he was trying not to look at Tim because it was so horrific. Bernie also says at this point he felt he did all he can do, and he gets off the bus. Vince then begins decapitating Tim. His head is now fully detached from his body. He grabs it by the hair and displays it at the window for everyone to see. He then returns to the rest of Tim's body and begins severing it. He eats some of Tim's flesh and shows everyone what he's doing from the window. Passengers are outside vomiting and crying and waiting on the Canadian police to show up. You guys know what the windows on a Greyhound bus look like. They are large, and they could see everything that was happening inside the bus. Vince is cutting out body parts and showing them off at the window. The police were not prepared for what they were going to find that day when they arrived. All they had to go on was there was a report of a stabbing on a bus. They thought this was an assault and that when they got there, the victim would be treated for his injuries and the attacker would be arrested. They had no idea the level of gruesomeness that they were going to find. They arrive and are told the suspect is in the bus. A passenger had been standing outside the door armed with a crowbar and a hammer in case Vince tried to run out. Vince tries to get away by driving the bus, but the driver had engaged the emergency immobilizer system that prevented the bus from operating. I didn't even know that buses had those things. The police see this guy on the bus is parading another man's head around and eating him. He is pacing the length of the bus back and forth. A heavily armed tactical unit and hostage negotiator arrive, and the standoff begins. Passengers are taken away from the scene for interviews, and Vince yells out in broken English that he has to stay on the bus forever. This would go on for a while. 4.5 hours later, this is now 1:30 a.m. Vince breaks one of the windows and climbs out. He was shot with a taser and hits the ground where he is placed under arrest. Inside the bus, they found various body parts that Vince had desecrated. They find Tim's head, and his eyes, his nose, his ears, and his tongue were missing. I can't imagine what that looked like, not even in a movie. Tim's eyes and his heart were never found and believed to have been eaten by Vince. But inside Vince's pockets, they found Tim's ears, his tongue, and his nose. They found plastic bags inside the bus where Vince was stuffing Tim's body parts into. This whole bus is a complete bloodbath. Meanwhile, Tim's good friend, Derek, is at the bus station waiting on Tim's bus to arrive so he could give him a ride. It's well past the time, and the bus should have arrived by now. He contacts Greyhound, who tells him that the bus is delayed. He waited for 4 hours, and then he left around 1 a.m. when the bus terminal closed. News reports started coming in that a man was murdered on a Greyhound bus. Tim's friends fear the worst. Officials won't release his name publicly, but they say the man is young, roughly 18 to 20 years old. He's around 5'5" and 125 pounds. Everyone is trying to contact Tim. They go to Tim's dad's house and they wait outside. Tim's father comes home from work and he sees the group there and he's smiling and he's like, "Hey, you guys waiting here for Tim?" They explain that someone on a Greyhound bus was murdered last night and they can't reach Tim. They all go inside and huddle around the computer. He calls the police for confirmation. Later that evening, Tim's father had to go in and do something that I'm sure was the worst moment of his life, and that was confirm what was left of his son's body. I thought about this, and I imagine the medical examiner likely covered 90% of Tim's remains. They probably only showed him tattoos and distinctive markings. I don't know for sure, though. Friends and family mourned as they learned exactly what happened. They don't discuss the gruesome details and hope it was just very quick and that he didn't suffer. They say Tim had never even been in a fight in his life. He was fun and loving and wouldn't hurt a fly. Surveillance video from the bus showed Tim sleeping before this happened. He didn't provoke Vince in any way. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. It literally could have been any passenger on the bus that day. Vince Lee was brought into court on charges of second-degree murder, and the only words he muttered were for someone to kill him. After Vince's arrest, the boy who had bought the laptop for $60 contacted police, and he gave them the laptop as evidence. A random businessman heard about this and told the family he would buy the boy a brand new laptop for his honesty and just for trying to help. I know you guys want to know what was in the laptop. They found emails he had sent, but they were all in Chinese, so a translator is brought in, and he said that they were all pretty mundane, just talking about how beautiful the country is. Vince Lee, remember, was diagnosed with schizophrenia in 2005. He was not on medication or doing anything to help himself treatment-wise. And in March of 2009, Vince pled not criminally responsible. That means he admits, yes, I did this horrible act, but I did it because I had a voice in my head telling me to kill this demon. He said the voice told him if he didn't kill this force of evil on the bus, that he would be killed himself. He thought he was doing something good and that he was going to walk out of the bus a hero. You can see why he was parading Tim's head around. He wanted to show everyone, look, I killed the bad guy. He won't hurt anyone now. One reporter said his brain failed him. The judge accepted the diagnosis after psychologists found that Vince really didn't have any control of what he was doing. It was like an out-of-body experience. He is sent to live in a mental health facility instead of going to prison. In this facility, Vince is given medication for his condition, which he has to take multiple times a day. He is granted daily supervised walks, and each year he was given little bits of freedom at a time. He was allowed to walk by himself on the beach at one point. He was also given 30-minute outside sessions with no supervision. In 2016, Vince is moved to an independent living portion where he can live alone, but he has to attend counseling sessions and his medication is heavily monitored. In 2017, Vince has been in this mental health facility for 9 years. Well, according to a 1999 ruling by the Supreme Court of Canada, a review board must order an absolute discharge if a person doesn't pose a significant threat to public safety. An absolute discharge is given to Vince. That means Vince is a free man. Vince has no family, no friends, no support, and no supervision. Vince did agree to have his medication supervised. He doesn't have to, but he requested it be monitored anyway. He also agreed to stay engaged with his doctors and mental health therapists, but he doesn't have to do that either. There's no legal obligation that says he has to do anything but live as free as you or I. Vince is described as being remorseful and says he feels horrible about what he did to Tim, but he had no control over it. Vince changed his name to Will Baker. His coworkers say he is a nice guy. People work alone with him all the time. Now, if Vince were to stop taking his medication, he could turn violent very quickly. So it's really important that he doesn't miss a dose. Tim's family said upon Vince's release that they have no comment. Chris Somerville, who is the chief executive of the Schizophrenia Society of Canada, says, he has been a model citizen. He lives every day with remorse about what he did, and he knows that it was atrocious, and he will never forgive himself. Society has nothing to worry about because, as the review board noted, when they gave him an absolute discharge, he is at a low risk of offending. The aftermath in this case lasted for years. At the time, Greyhound buses had a advertisement slogan that they had to change. It was kind of a stupid slogan to begin with. Its advertisements read, "There's a reason you've never heard of bus rage." They got rid of that for obvious reasons. Greyhound gave the passengers that were on the bus approximately $500 each for replacement clothing since their clothes were covered in blood. They weren't given any counseling or anything like that, which many believe Greyhound should have been responsible for. Some say that they still suffer PTSD from the scream that Tim let out and then watching him get attacked. Most have never been on public transit again. Some have become alcoholics and drug addicts, and their life has never been the same. They all think it's unfair that Vince was able to get treatment, but they weren't. Even some of the emergency responders were affected due to how gruesome it was. Remember Bernie, the brave second bus driver who arrived at the scene and walked on the bus during the attack? He said he felt guilt for many years, but he tells himself Tim was long gone before he got there. His wife made him go to therapy with a psychologist because he was having a lot of problems. He couldn't go back to driving a bus again, so he practiced driving empty buses for a while as a form of therapy. A truck driver who pulled over and helped barricade Vince inside the bus said he's become a raging alcoholic. As well, in 2014, one of the officers who was the first to arrive on the scene committed suicide. His obituary read that he suffered for years with severe PTSD. Tim's son was born 5 months after his death in December 2008. There was a lengthy custody battle between Colleen and Tim's mom. I'm not sure why she was found not to be fit to raise her child, but when the boy was 6 years old, Tim's mother was given custody. Today in 2022, he's 13 years old and seems to be living his best life with grandma from what I've read. His name hasn't been released to protect his identity, but I saw his photo and he does look a lot like Tim. The last I read, Colleen was fighting to get custody back of the boy, and the whole situation was just ugly. The boy knows who his dad was and that his dad is in heaven because a person hurt him. I don't know if he knows the extent of it. I'm sure he's capable of accessing Google, and we'll find out someday. And, that's just terrible to think about. Tim's mother says Vince Lee has an incurable disease that makes him do terrible things. I believe he needs to be in an institution that addresses those needs. I don't think it matters if you're mentally ill or not. If you kill someone, you should lose your freedom, period. Vince Lee got help, good for him. Maybe he's feeling better today, but my son is still dead. What if he chooses not to take his medications? We all know what he's capable of. Tim's father says, "We've been trying to move on, but it's been very hard, and it's still very hard. I don't think we'll ever be over it." He also got a large tattoo of Tim on his upper chest. I try to think about how to wrap this up. I read a passage from one reporter who said what I think a lot of us are thinking, and he said, "To the average citizen, this case is more than a tragedy. It's a travesty. How the public should be forced to take a chance on an unsupervised nut who committed the most barbaric act of public murder and cannibalism I've ever heard of is plain stupid. It's too high a risk." That's it for this week. Rest in peace to Tim, whose life was cut short just for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. As always, my sources are listed in the description area. Take care, and much love to you all.